Okay. Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 47, August 9th, 2006. We're visiting with Alec Vedvei, longtime Kingsbury County Cooperative leader. Alec, where and when were you born?
I was born at Lake Preston, here, South Dakota, and I'm the oldest son, but the third child of Sam and Andrina Vedvei.
Okay. And where was your family from originally?
My dad and mother were both immigrants from Norway, and they met on a farm about 3 miles east of here, both as hired help.
Oh, okay. And you want to talk about your dad a little bit? What sort of a person was he?
My dad was a quite a religious person. When he came from Norway, he was what you'd probably call indentured, because he had to work for John Hesby for quite a few months in order to pay his trip over here. Yep.
And your mother?
And my mother decided that Norway probably wasn't quite the place to be at that time. It was kind of tough going, and so she had a brother over here in the North Preston area that she came to.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And you want to talk a little bit more about that indentured thing, because that seems to me, we all hear about that during the colonial period in the United States, but we don't think about it as late as maybe 100 years ago or more.
I don't know if indentured is quite the right word, but it kind of serves the purpose right now, because John Hesby was a big farmer out south of Hetland, and of course the immigrants that came were hardly better than slaves. I mean, they were fed and clothed and taken care of that way, but and fed well. But back in those days, everything was horses, and so the field work was a lot of brute force and awkwardness. And my dad, being young and physically fit, they put in some long, hard hours.
Yeah. Did your parents, as they started farming here, did they belong to any cooperatives? Had cooperatives started around here yet then?
Yes. I think, I don't know exactly when they started farming, if there was cooperatives or not.
Yeah.
But shortly thereafter, where they became involved with Community Oil Company in Arlington. And not so much Farmers Union back then. They didn't get involved too much with that.
Okay. Do you think that, and I guess this question came up and was suggested to me by one of my members of my advisory committee, who has a lot of interest in Scandinavian kind of things, Art Husbo from the Center for Western Studies at Augustana. Do you think that people with a Scandinavian background have a particular attachment to the cooperative way of doing business?
That's a good question. I guess I would have to say in certain ways, yes, because if there was illness or sickness in any of the farm families, there was always, they'd get together, and they'd do the work for that guy. They'd put in his crop, or they'd harvest his crop. And so, yes, that's a form of being cooperative. And also a new baby in the family, they were always there for something or other. Another thing, they were quite church-minded, and whenever there was a quilting bee or something like that, yes, I would say that they were cooperative-minded in that sense.
And no doubt Lutheran.
Yes, Norwegian
Very
Lutheran.
strong Lutherans, yeah.
Lutefisk and Lefse.
Okay. I guess I didn't ask you, what year did they come over here?
Let's see. Helen, can you help me out on that one? She she's got that in that other book in there, and I don't have it here in front of me right now, but she'll answer that question for you on both of them. Yes.
All right.
Well, it's further back there. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you have put a lot of stuff together there.
I knew it would be in here, but right here, the Vedvei family, maybe, huh? Or were we on the?
Gotta be in the. Should be right. Look at this. That ain't it. That ain't it. That ain't it.
How about the Vedvei family there?
Oh. Here we are.
Okay.
He came in 1907.
April 21st, 1907, at the age of 20 is when he arrived in Hetland, South Dakota.
Okay.
And your mother.
And my mother,
March.
she came on the 19th of March, 1909, and like I said, she lived with her brother August Russet, and then she was employed as a hired girl at the Erie Kesby farm out east of town.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What was life like on the farm when you were a kid?
Well, we went through the dirty 30s, so it wasn't easy. And my dad, of course, things were tough enough so that he worked on WPA with a team of horses, and a dollar went a long ways back in those days.
What sort of commodities were you growing around here then? Was there certainly corn, but...
Corn, oats. We raised a lot of oats because oats was the fuel for the horses. And there was some barley and wheat. Not as much corn, because corn was a little more labor intensive in the fall, and a lot of it was picked by hand, to start with there, or one row picker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No soybeans back in
No
those
soybeans,
days.
no soybeans, no flax.
Yep.
No.
Yep. What did you have some particular jobs on the farm you liked when you were a kid? Everybody had some favorite thing they liked to do. Mine was swathing, but what was yours?
I think my favorite thing was thrashing, because then we had a team and a wagon, and pitch bundles into the machine, and it was always a contest, kind of to see who could put on the biggest load and have the most bushels. And we had a guy that run the thrashing machine that would keep track, of who had so many bushels. That's the way we went, by the bushels on the load. Not necessarily the size of the load, it was the bushels on the load.
Okay. When you were young, what did you want to do? Did you want to farm? Is that what you always wanted to do?
Not really. I thought about that once, but things were tough and hard to get started, because my dad was a renter, of course, and I guess to tell you the truth, I went 3 semesters to Augustana College after high school, and at that time I thought maybe I wanted to be a coach.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to get into coaching and teaching, because I had 2 sisters that had gone to General Beadle at that time, it's Madison now, but and they were teachers, and I thought maybe that was a good thing to do. But then my dad went to Norway because he had never gone back, and his dad was getting quite old and he wanted to go back, and so I came home to the farm, and my other brother went to the service at that time, and so that kind of got me into the thinking about maybe farming, but it was hard to get going, and so I'd done a number of things. I hired out to Barbara Johnson in Hetland, and that was about the time that there was a lot of rural electrification going on, and I got involved. I probably wired on over 300 different farms in this eastern part of South Dakota, around this Hetland, Lake Preston, Old Hamdy, Smith area, and it just surprised me sometimes when you turn the switch on for the first time how some of those people would react. Oh my, and they'd look up at the light. Yes, it was pretty interesting. I'd done that for 6 years.
Okay.
And then I decided that maybe I'd go to work over here at Lake Preston for the Farmers Union.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
During that time, or in between that time, I did spend a little time in the service. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we're gonna go back a little ways. Where did you go to school at?
District 44 was a country school, one-room school, and we had a lot of fun memories out there at Christmas time with the Christmas programs and that sort of stuff, you know. Kitten ball games, of course, at recess, and the old furnace, you know, in the basement with the register and coal and all that good stuff. But it was a fun time. And then after that, after I graduated from 8th grade, I went to Hetland High School. Graduated there in 43.
Mm-hmm. So they had a high school over there in those days.
Oh, yes. Yes, Hetland had a high school.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you mentioned that that you went to college for 3 semesters. What about the military? Did you mentioned you served in the military also? When was that?
I was drafted in the Army in 48 and 49.
Okay. So you were kind of in between the two wars.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Did you have you mentioned a brother? Was he in World War II, or was that
no?
Also in between.
He was kind of in between too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where did you meet your wife at? What's her name, by the way?
Her maiden name was McLean.
Mm-hmm.
Her first name is Helen.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess coming over here to Preston, you know, for ball games and one thing and another,
sure.
I was quite interested in sports, and she was a drum major, or majorette, or whatever they call it, and that's when I first, what should we say, got a look at her.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. You mentioned working for the Farmers Union. Was that the oil company in
Yes,
Preston?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Senex Oil Company.
Yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I started working for them, Helen helped me out, in the fall of 54?
Yeah.
Fall of 54.
Okay.
Denny Burns run the station up at Irwin, and he passed away on, I think, Labor Day. They had a dance here in town, and he suddenly collapsed, and so they wanted somebody to run that station, and I guess they kind of knew that I had a little experience after working in Hetland, in the hardware store there, and wiring and stuff, and so I was hired to run that station in Irwin. Then they changed managers here, and they decided that maybe the thing to do was to consolidate a few of these outposts, and so they wanted me to come to Preston. I did, and I worked in the office here for a short while, and then there was one of the employees quit, and I went on the fuel truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was employed there for 6 years.
Okay, from 54 then about 1960.
About that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and you also started farming in the 1950s.
That's about the time when I started farming in the late yes, about in there, and we rented a farm from Henry Larson, who lived up there north of Lake Preston, and that was in the spring of '59.
Okay.
Yeah. That was 2/4 of land adjacent to the North Preston Church. But I lived on my dad's farm, and then we farmed together with my brother, and it worked out pretty good for a few years. And then in 1966, then I rented from Henry Larson, and little different farm, and pretty soon, we decided after he passed away that maybe we should try to buy that place, and we bought those 2 quarters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did you like about cooperatives? You worked over here, you worked at some, and then you've been involved. What was it that attracted you to cooperatives as a way of doing business?
Well, I guess most of the people were pretty good to work with, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And on the tank wagon, I was very privileged, because on my customers, they said, "Alec, keep my tank full. I don't want you to let it go empty." They trusted a person, and I'd come out there, and if it went empty, hey, I caught more heck for having it empty than stopping maybe and dropping off 200 gallons. 200 gallons nowadays, it would be a drop in the bucket, but back then, it was a drop. Yeah.
Yep. When did you first get involved in being elected to the Kingsbury Electric Board?
Okay, I had a journeyman's electric license, and so they knew that I had an interest in rural electrification, and I was asked to serve as a Minuteman for Kingsbury Electric Co-op, and I accepted, and I served 2 terms as a Minuteman. And I was president.
You want to talk about what was entailed in being a Minuteman?
A Minuteman really was a sounding board for the directors. That's really what it was. If they had a problem or kind of wanted to know the feel of what people were really thinking, why they would once or twice a year they'd call the Minutemen in, and we'd just have a sit-down session and talk things over. Maybe they'd give us a small meal or something like that, Yeah. And I was president of that organization in the last term. And then in 1970, I was elected to the Kingsbury Electric Board, and I served on that board for 18 years.
Okay.
And it was while I was there that in 1975 that I was elected to the East River Electric Co-op Board, and I served there for 13 years, and several of those years I was treasurer of that organization.
Okay. When you first got involved with the electric co-op, what were the kind of issues they were dealing with? They had passed the period of getting farms electrified around here, I would presume.
Pretty much so, yes. Although they might have had that, but you'd be surprised at all the things that people found that they could do with electricity that before they probably done with a gas engine. And so there was always updates. I'm thinking especially about drying bins. They wanted to get more drying bins. Then they wanted to get electric heat, and that was a big thing. Electric heat and heat storage. That was a big thing with all the heat storage units that they put in about that time. Yeah. And then load management, So there was a number of issues there that were pretty interesting to work with.
Yeah, and you were involved in wiring homes earlier on. I would assume that a lot of the folks probably didn't wire as extensively as they might have needed to later on because they didn't anticipate how much electricity was going to change their life, maybe.
That's very true, because when we first wired, a 60 amp entrance in a house was about as big as anybody wanted to go. And then, of course, when electric heat and hot water and air conditioning and things like that came in, it was soon pretty evident that we better have at least a 200 amp entrance. And so there was a lot of updating to do.
During that time when you were serving on those boards, were there some memorable people you had a chance to work with?
Oh, yes. Bob Farragon comes to mind, Gene Hexum down at East River, Roland Anderson over here at Kingsbury Electric was a fine fellow to work with. And, I'm sure there were others too, but those come to mind right away. Yep. You want to get that, Helen?
Did you, when you first started your time as a board member, had there been somebody else who was a director that you kind of looked to as kind of an example of the way someone should be as a director?
Yes, I will say that. Carl Wirtz was a man's name. Carl was president of the board at that time, and he was from the Bancroft area, but very knowledgeable about rural electrics and a fine fellow to work with. You know, if you disagreed, you weren't disagreeable. You know, that type of a guy, and we got along splendidly. Yes.
What were you were on the East River board then? Well, what were some of the issues you were dealing with during that time?
Rates are always an issue, and also adequate power. And the issue then, of course, was a lot of basin electric, and the split between load management, radio-controlled towers, and of course, you know, the river power was always something, and the Western Area Power Administration, there was always, you know, things that we always had one of those people at least come to our annual meeting, update us on the overall picture.
Did you go on some of the Washington lobbying trips?
I did not go on the Washington lobby trips, but I have been to several of the national meetings. But no, I was not. I was a delegate to Washington one time, but I can't remember why. But I didn't go to that. I had a conflict there, and I couldn't go.
They were involved with a number of. There was attacks really on the rural electric program that went on periodically.
And they wanted to privatize the dams, you know, at that time. And I did write several letters, and got responses from some of them that we dealt with.
Who were some of the other East River directors at the time you were serving?
Just give me a couple of minutes on that one, will you? And
Okay.
I'm a little slow on names.
Okay.
Verge Fodness was chairman of the board at that time, and Bob Ching was another one, and our friend out here at Miller. George Hargens, who later became president up at Basin. Yep.
At what you also, of course, got involved in the rural water issue, and that's
yes, I did.
I want to talk about that a little bit. What was the water conditions around here? What kind of water did you have?
Our water here was very hard, and it had a lot of dissolved solids in it. And my problem, I dug a new well, I think in probably about 1968, and I got water because the other well just couldn't supply what I needed, and I got an open bottom well. By that I mean there was no sand point; it was just down on rock. But it also had a lot of rust, iron in it, you know, and so I was in the business of farrowing hogs, and it seemed like I got along fine during farrowing, but when I weaned and those pigs went on water on their own, well, I got scours putting every time, and so I got real interested in rural water. Yeah.
So there was a steering committee organized.
Yes.
And that happened when?
Bud Wunspec, Jerry Icast, and myself, we always kind of wondered if we couldn't make a water system work for Badger Township. And then we went around and we did get a bunch of sign-ups, about 90% sign-ups in Badger Township, $25 good intention fee. And they got kind of wind of what we were trying to do, and so we scheduled a meeting in Arlington. And at that meeting, where there was a lot of interest, and it was also at one of those meetings that I was elected chairman of the steering committee. And then one of the first things we did was we better get a name for ourselves, and so we called ourselves the Kingbrook Rural Water System, and that name is still there today. So, yeah.
How did you go about deciding what area to include? Was there ever any interest in going any broader than primarily the two counties?
Yes, we first of all we had I talked to the banker in Arlington, a good friend of mine, Bob Gunderson, and I said, Bob, how about it if the bank would give a free dinner to anybody that would sign up, and we'll have a big sign-up day. And Bob says, you betcha. And he said, we'll even lend them the money. And at that time it was $250, to sign up. And of course, if they'd signed up with a good intention fee, why, that applied, so it was $225. And that day in Arlington, we had probably the biggest day that Arlington has ever had. People were in town, whether they were in town for the free meal or to sign up, I don't know which, but anyway, it went over real big. So then we decided, well, we can't quit now, so we had another one about a month or so later over here at Lake Preston with approximately the same result. And then the word kind of spread, and it wasn't too long until the county agents got involved, and so next thing you know, I was clear down to Montrose one night, almost down to interstate, and they just kept coming, and we did run into a little bit of friction because some of the people, the original people, thought maybe we were getting too big. But we early on decided, once we got into construction, that it was going to be one rate for all, regardless of when construction was. And that was an issue at the time.
Yeah, and this was the first rural water system in the state?
No.
Had there been some other ones?
There was one down with Sioux Falls that was going, and Brookings Dual was going to at the time, just getting started.
Okay.
And so Kingbrook and Brookings Dual shared a pumping station over there north of Bruce.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where the water came from?
That was where Phase 1 water came from. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The Big Sioux Aquifer. Yeah.
Are all of the communities in the counties included, or as far as, you have the rural areas and probably all of Kingsbury, but over in Brookings, do you have Brookings City? Are they part of it, or?
Brookings City, as far as I know, is not on rural water. But a lot of these other towns have seen the light and gone on to rural water, including Lake Preston. DeSmit yet has not, because they are sitting very close to the DeSmit aquifer, and so they have not gone on.
Oh, okay.
Hetland, Irwin, Badger, Oldham, they're all on.
Did you get some assistance from the rural electrics? Were they helpful too?
Very, very helpful. Roland Anderson, I thought probably even being manager of Kingsbury Electric, bent over backwards to help us with office space and also organizing the first. He took care of the financial end once we got going. Very good.
Where did you get the finances?
FHA was our major finance. Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Was there ever any federal program to assist? I know that directed.
Later on, they got into a little bit more, but basically FHA.
Some of the more recent systems are looking for federal dollars for.
Oh yeah, well it's federal dollars, of course, is where it comes from.
Yeah.
I got to tell you this, that at one time we were looking at the entire system to get going, and so Jerry Icast and Cliff Jacobson from Sioux Valley was also very helpful, very helpful. And we got a call to come over to the office in Huron, and Bob Swartout was the administrator over there, and he says, well, he sat down and was looking kind of glum, and he said, well, I got good news for you guys. Oh, well, what's that? Well, he said, I got bad news too. Well, lay it on us. Well, he says, we're not going to give you the $7 million that you wanted to get going, but if you want to break it down into phases, we'll give you $1.5 million. So that first loan was $1.5 million, and we jumped at the chance. We jumped at the chance. And so we started with phase 1, which was in the north or northeast part of the system, up around Lake Poncet and Badger and that area.
Okay. Now, there was earlier on, there was a 2% loan program for the rural electrics. What kind of interest did they charge you for
5.
rural water?
5. 40 years, 5%.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How important has getting a rural water system established been to this area?
Very, very important. Matter of fact, I'll say that I don't know, I personally don't know of anybody, once they got rural water in, that didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
They've abandoned their wells. And
yeah, most of them had wells.
yes.
In some areas, like where I grew up in North Dakota, people also would have to actually they would buy water and from water delivery and fill cisterns and that kind of thing. Was that happening around here at all too?
There was some of that, but that was pretty small scale stuff,
Yeah,
really. You know,
yeah.
cistern.
Couldn't do much for livestock.
No,
that kind of thing.
no.
It was in for the for in the home.
No.
Okay. You've also been active in other aspects of your community. You want to talk about a little bit of that? How about a township officer? You served.
I was township assessor a few years. I've been on the school board before the country schools closed. About that time, when they more or less all the country schools kind of locked up and come to town, I was on the school board.
Where does the Hetland? Where do they go to school at now?
Hetland pretty much split, although I would say the majority of them probably came to Lake Preston, the others came to Arlington. Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the rural water, I had one other question. What impact has it been of the loss of farms out in the countryside since that was established? Have there been a number of farms that are not, where there's nobody living there anymore, and how does that impact the systems in general?
Well, it seems like those farms that were abandoned, or whatever you want to call it, for some reason or other, they probably kept the water tap there and used it as a pasture tap.
Oh, okay.
A lot of places.
Okay.
There were a few possibly that have been abandoned, but I would say the majority of them are not that way. Yeah.
That's also an impact a little bit for the rural electrics.
That's very true. Same thing is going on there.
Yeah.
Although I would say that there's more and more pasture taps that have gone in, after the people left the farm. Because the cattle seem like, dugouts, but the dugouts in the summertime and later on in the season get kind of slimy, and the cattle don't do near as good on a dugout water as they do on rural water.
Okay. And I think in the information that I found on the internet, it also said you were on the fair board here. Is that right?
Achievement.
Pardon?
4-H.
Boy, the 4-H fair board, yes.
Oh, the 4-H fair board.
4-H fair board, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And Lake Preston City Council?
Yes, I served a term there. I went on that. I went on that because of my wife.
Okay.
She did not like Preston water, and so she said we got to get rural water to town, and it was my main objective to go on the city council to get rural water to Lake Preston, and I got the job done.
All right. Bad water is not a good thing.
Bad water is not a good thing.
No. Here's a kind of a general question. At one time, there was a certain, I guess you would call it an edginess in the relationship between people from the countryside and people in town. Have you ever noticed that around here?
I'd say no to that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe back 60 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
when we had a swimming pool here, and we'd come to town on Sunday afternoon. The town kids were always a lot better swimmers than we were, you know, and so we'd probably get ducked a few times, but, you know.
Okay.
Outside of that, I'd say no.
All right. You have received a number of awards. I think a Memorial Award for Rural Water Systems, Anderson Award. What's that?
Would you like to see them?
Sure.
Better make sure the bed is made, is it?
No, I'll just bring them.
Oh, okay.
That's good. That's good.
Yes.
All right.
The Carol Anderson Memorial. Carol Anderson was a good friend of mine.
Okay.
Carol lived over in that Bruce area,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very instrumental in getting the neighbors over there to get right-of-ways. That was a big issue back then, you know, and some of them said, no, you'll take the ditch. We won't give you right-of-way. And we weren't paying for right-of-ways because we said, hey, you give us a right-of-way so the neighbor can have the right-of-way, and let it snowball that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a few places where we did have to take the ditch.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Was that the case? Was that the case with rural electrics too? That there was sometimes a struggle to get the right way for the poles?
I don't remember that so much because it was a little different there because there they paid the rural electrics paid for like East River paid for so much a hole for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a picture.
Carol passed away.
Okay. A Lusk Award.
Wasn't here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Lusk Award here? What is that? I know it's from Huron, but
yeah, the Lusk Award was an award given for service to agriculture, and I think it probably had to do with water and electricity and a better way of life for rural people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And those, of course, were the family that originally owned the Daily Plains.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And also an Eminent Farmer Award here. Those are always a pretty prestigious award.
Yes, I was quite surprised to get that one. I had no idea that was coming until I was called and said it was in the works. So my picture is hanging down there at Brookings.
That's very nice. You have kids. You want to talk about your kids a little bit?
Yes, I certainly do. I have 4 kids. Jean, of course, is probably the most well known right now because she's the First Lady of South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Married to Governor Mike Rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And Al is the next one, and Al was all 3 boys were outstanding athletes for Lake Preston, and Al, of course, was involved in FFA, and so he was the state president of FFA.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, because of that, why I received the honorary chapter farmer and honorary state farmer award, which was basically because of Al and helping him out. Charlie was the next son, and he's presently, well, both Al and Charlie are presently farming.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie is on the home place. Al got involved with Charlie cattle. Got involved because his father is Arnold. His father-in-law is Arnold Wink, and Arnold was, a pioneer Charlet person.
Mm-hmm.
And presently, Al serves as the national chairman of the Charlet Association.
Mm.
So he's gone some.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like I say, Charlie's on the home farm, and diversified operation. Son John went to National College of Business in Rapid City, and then he went to work for Northwest Public Service in Huron. And about how many years ago then, since he went up to about maybe 7 or 8, huh?
Close to 10.
10? 10 years ago, why he was asked to join up with the student loan program in Aberdeen, and he's been there ever since.
Okay.
Yep.
You want to say a word about your son-in-law, the governor?
It's no secret that I was a registered Democrat, and when Mike decided to run for office, so of course, you know all about the primary back then. It was kind of a heated battle between 3 different people, and Mike did not get into the mud throwing business like a couple of the candidates did. And I told him early on, I said, Mike, if you want to run for a governor, the family's behind you. And most of us switched parties so we could support him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think he's done an excellent job, and we have excellent family relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think he's done some good thing for the state, and I hope that he'll get to serve another 4-year term.
Yeah, sure. Let's go back to cooperatives. The challenges facing, I guess, organizations and cooperatives have changed over the years. What seems like the biggest change to you as you look at from your earlier days to today?
As far as involvement, or
the kind of issues and challenges that face cooperatives, whether they be water or electric. Communications or farm supply, like
I've got to say that the Senex and management seems to have been, and accounts receivable are the 2 big things, because there were some of the directors who were farmers, and kind of thought that maybe their cooperative should be their banker, and it got some of them in trouble. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think that was one of the big challenges here in Lake Preston, and probably the reason that Senex had to fold here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you have good management, then I think that like the rural water systems, we got started right, and we're going good. Mm-hmm. As far as the elevator here now, I think they've got good management. I think they're doing real well. Mm-hmm. Some of the smaller elevators, when they lost the rail, when the rail kind of folded up, are hurting because of transportation costs.
Yeah.
They have become more of a service organization, like they handle fertilizer, chemicals, do spraying, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Rather than as much grain handling as they could do. Yeah.
Another issue, of course, for the elevators was the income they used to get from government payments for storage.
Storage, and that's dried up.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give someone today who wanted to get involved with one or another cooperatives or with farming? You've been asked. You're a senior citizen around here now.
Farming right now is a big gamble. Although I will say this, with crop insurance now that they have, you are protected to a certain extent. Although you got that premium to pay, but it is a kind of a safety net. The other big thing, of course, getting started in farming is competition is tough, real tough. And it seems like if there's any land that comes up for either for sale or rent, unless you are a relative or a good friend, you have a hard time getting started.
Mm-hmm. What are land values around here now?
We have land values here that have escalated terrifically in the last 5-6 years. We've had land, we got some land right east of town here right now. It's for sale for $2,500 an acre.
Do you think agriculture can support those kind of
No, I do
values on
not.
land?
No, I do not.
Yeah.
They could farm that for a lifetime and then won't get it paid for. Interest costs and production costs will eat them up. The margins are just not there.
Mm-hmm. And a great deal of uncertainty with as far as
government programs,
chemical and fuel costs.
That's right.
Right
yep.
now.
Yeah.
Yep. So, with all of that, are you an optimist or a pessimist when it comes to the future around here?
Well, I'm certainly not a pessimist.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not a pessimist. No, I think I don't know what the future is for small towns. I don't know that, but I think that communities, if they want to support their community, they'll keep it going as long as possible. As long as it's not only economical, feasible, but I should say just friendly feasible.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe the higher fuel costs will keep people closer to home and maybe more patronize their local businesses more than they have been?
I think they'll have to, because if now with this Alaskan pipeline, if that's going to impact things and fuel goes, we thought maybe $2 a gallon gasoline was too much. Now it's $3 and probably going higher. Yes, I think it will have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a drought in much of South Dakota this year. What is it around here? Is the crops been impacted by the weather?
Crops have been impacted here by the weather, yes, because we are short moisture. We will not have the crop that we had last year. All the small grain crop this year was much better than expected, and the quality was good. The corn and beans yet, depending on your soil, there will be some, but it certainly won't be like what we have had.
Mm-hmm. I guess one thing that we didn't talk about were the new value-added co-ops. Are your family involved with any of those, the soybeans or the
Yes.
ethanol plants?
Yes, the boys are involved with the soybean plant over at Volga, and I think Charlie's got some stock in. Which one was that? Wentworth. Yes. So they are involved, and I guess it's no secret, but there's a possibility that we may have an ethanol plant here just east of town, a little ways.
Really?
It's in the works. Whether it develops or not, I can't answer that right now. But there's a lot of talk about it.
Yeah. There's some concerns, of course, about the reduced corn production this year, as far as the impact on the ethanol plants, as far as getting the corn in.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you'd like to comment on? Just kind of an open-ended question here for you.
Oh, I don't know. I guess if I was going to say anything, I think that families are very important to us, and church is also a mainstay, and then our kids, their involvement in the community affairs. Al now is on the Kingsbury Electric Board, and as well as other organizations. So yes, I'd say that we're very concerned with family and other things here.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of cooperative heritage in the family continuing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. We've been visiting with Alec Vedvei. Thank you for participating in the Cooperative Legacy Project.
You're welcome.